Hello friends, welcome back to Belle's Library. I'm Heather, and today we're going to be talking through how my reading went in the first quarter of the year. So anyways, we're going to be talking through January, February, and March, and my stats, what I've been reading, what genres I've been reading, what some of my favorite books and least favorite books were for each of the months, and just some fun stuff like that. I started doing these instead of wrap-ups every month, and I really enjoy them because I get to talk about some of the books that maybe weren't included in vlogs that I've been reading, and I get to tell you about them. And a lot of times I really am just wanting to tell you about some of the favorite books that I've read that I haven't had a chance to chat about. But sometimes I also want to tell you guys about books that I didn't like so much. And then just kind of check in for how I'm doing for the year. So we can kind of see how maybe things have changed throughout the year. I don't know. It's just interesting to also look at the different genres that I read because each quarter I feel like I'm more in the mood for this genre or that genre, or depending on what I'm reading for videos, maybe it's a little bit different here or there. And if I'm reading more adult at the moment or young adult, or what kind of vibes are going on, and maybe some things that I want to switch up for the next quarter. So just some fun stuff to kind of check out, and I wanted to chat about you guys with. Anyways, before we jump into talking about all of that fun stuff, get down below, click the subscribe button. I also have my Instagram and Goodreads and Storygraph linked down below for you guys, so if you want to go and check me out over there, we can talk bookish on all the different platforms. I would absolutely love and adore that, so go ahead and do that really fast, and then we'll jump into some of the stats. Alright, so for the first few months of the year, I read a total of 54 books. This year, I am breaking down my pages outside of how many hours I listened to audiobooks. So it's not like all of the amount of pages, it's in two different categories. Let's just talk about it, okay? So I read 9,502 pages between those 3 months, and then I listened to 177 hours. So it's not out of that 9,000 pages. That also includes my audiobooks. These are separate. So it's kind of how that works. The breakdown by month is in January, I read 27 books. And then February, I had 10. And March, I had 17 books. But I actually read the most read the most pages in March. I read 3,800 pages. And then I had also listened to the most hours in March. I was like, February, I don't know why, but I always feel a little like slumpy and I don't really finish a lot of books. I think I read 10 books last year as well. It's just not like a super big month for me for reading. Like I'm not like feeling it. But then I got into March and I was like, I'm feeling it. And I had a really good March. So I listened to 79 hours. I don't know if I said that yet, but I did a lot of reading that month. So kind of breaking this down into audiobooks and physical or ebooks, I listened to 22 audiobooks out of the 54 books that I read, and then I read 31 books, either physical book or ebook, and then I had one where I mixed the two, and I'm pretty sure I looked that one up and it was spoiler alert. I started reading this one ebook and I just was kind of struggling to get through it, so I switched to the audio, which really helped. So that's kind of why I had a mix there. I'd say about probably like half and half between reading and audiobook. So looking at the age category that I was reading in, 29 of the 54 books that I read were actually adult. So I did swing a little more adult this time, which I feel like I'm usually like almost half and half, but maybe a little bit more on the YA side of things. So that's kind of interesting to me. And I only had 20 books that were YA. And then I had read 3 middle grades and 2 new adults, which is a little bit more than I usually read as well. So those categories are getting a little bit more love, but still don't have a ton of books in that area. As far as star rating, I did also start doing half stars this year. And so this looks a little bit different too because I have all those half stars. But starting from the top with 5 stars, I had 8 books in this category. 4.5, I had 17 stars. 4 stars, 17 books. 16 books at 4 stars. And then 9 books and 3.5 stars, and 2 books at 3 stars. And then I had 1 2.5 star, and I had 1 1.5 star, which actually was a DNF as well. I didn't actually finish it, but I made it a rating because I made it to 65% of the way into the book, so I felt like I had read enough to also rate it. So that's kind of how that one worked. So mostly 4 to 4.5 star reads, which is really good. And then 3.5 and 5 were pretty close, and then 3 and down were pretty low. So I have been reading books that I mostly enjoy, which is wonderful. I love that. Looking at what genres I have been reading, let's check out what I read the most. Horror. I read 18 horror novels, which was, yeah, the most out of any of them. And the next ones that were after that were I had 11 fantasies and 11 romance books. I definitely was really feeling romance quite a bit, so I'm glad to see that one kind of jumping up there. And then fantasy is usually my highest pretty consistently, but I have been feeling a little in a fantasy rut, so that one's a little lower for me, but it's still there because I'm still doing some other buddy reads, and you know, fantasy is still a really big part of my reading, so still up there. And then we jump down to 6 mystery books, and then 4 contemporary, 2 thrillers, and I had 1 sci-fi and 1 paranormal. I do feel like I'm reading a sci-fi right now, and I'm feeling sci-fi mood. So maybe I'll have some more sci-fis this next go around, because 1 sci-fi is really low for me. I usually have at least a few, and I do tend to enjoy sci-fi, so I'm kind of a little bit surprised by that. And then my last statistic for you guys is I read 13 of the books were from authors of color, and then 14 of my books had some kind of LGBTQ plus rep in them. So those are kind of some of my stats there. So now we're going to jump into the other part of this, which is me talking about some of my favorites and least favorites of each of the months. I tried to do 4 favorites and 2 least favorites for each month, but I think February I only have 1 book for the least favorites. I didn't read as much that month, and I just didn't have anything else to throw in there. So that's okay, because I'd rather have more favorites. Oh, and I guess January I kind of technically have like 5 for the favorites, but I just realized I kind of paired 2 of them together because they're in the same series. So we'll just start with that one. So in January, I read The Kiss Quotient and The Bride Test by Helen Huang, and they were so cute, and I love them. I think The Bride Test absolutely was my favorite between the 2, but I still super enjoyed The Kiss Quotient as well. So in The Kiss Quotient, our main character, she is like really good at math, and she works for this business that she like does a ton of good stuff there, and she is really good at her job. She has plenty of money, but she's not so good in the relationship department. She is on the spectrum, so she ends up hiring this guy who basically she hires him to help her in the bedroom so that she can get better at those skills in order to get a boyfriend. And then it's kind of their romance while they kind of work through some of that stuff. And it's really cute and sweet, and I really enjoyed it. And then The Bride Test, we have basically this mom who she goes over and basically gets a mail order bride for her son, who is also on the spectrum. So it's kind of a theme throughout these stories is that we do follow different main characters who are on the spectrum. And basically, yeah, so it's their romance. She like moves in with him and is trying to make it work. And he's just like, I don't know about this, but they're giving it the summer to see if this can be a something. And I just thought it was so cute, so sweet, so adorable. Loved it. I also read Night of the Mannequins by Stephen Graham Jones, and rather enjoyed that one. It was very interesting. We're basically following this group of teens, and they find this mannequin, and then all of a sudden the mannequin like is moving and just being creepy, and they're like, how is this mannequin moving by itself? What is going on? And it kind of just turns into this horror story. I'm not going to say much more about it because it is a short book, and so I don't want to give things away, but I really just thought it was super fun just trying to figure out what is actually going on and following these teens and this creepy mannequin. I don't know. It was a good time. It was a good time. Then I also had Slade House, and this one was just kind of different and unique. It was very interesting the way it was laid out. You kind of followed this entity, like house that came around, but it only came around like every, I think it was like 7 or 9 years or something. And then different, so you're following like each, like there's sections for each time this house like comes to be, and these people who live there who draw certain people in that they need to continue surviving. And it was interesting. It was different, and I really enjoyed the unique way the story was laid out. And then another one that I really enjoyed from that month was A Dowry of Blood. Sorry, I totally blanked for a minute there. And I know a lot of people have been kind of enjoying this one. I've been hearing a lot about it. I wanted to get into it, and I really enjoyed this one too. This one, we're following Dracula's bride pretty much, and she's writing a letter to Dracula, and it's basically like saying how her life was after she was made into Dracula's bride and was with him. And yeah, it's very interesting, and I loved the way it was written. It was really beautifully written, but definitely a different perspective and take on that story. Now, as far as the couple of books that I kind of didn't really enjoy for the month, honestly, neither of these books were inherently bad. I didn't like totally hate them. They were just kind of disappointing for me. So one of them is Across the Greengrass Fields by Shauna McGuire. This is the like 6th book in the Wayward Children series by Shauna McGuire. I've really enjoyed all of the books up until this point. This one I didn't really enjoy anything about it. It didn't have that magical touch to it, and the writing it just didn't quite pull me in. I don't know. It wasn't my favorite. So I was a little disappointed because I have really enjoyed so many of these books. And then I also was a little bit disappointed by Daughter of the Moon Goddess. I actually have a review for this book up, so I'll make sure to link it for you guys. But I just was super anticipating this one. It came out in January of this year, and I just was a little bummed. I probably just hyped it up way too much in my head, but you can get a lot more details in that review. But we're basically following this girl, and her mom is the moon goddess, and she ends up she's hidden away, and she ends up having to get away, and she meets the prince of outer space area, whatever you want to call it. Sorry, I'm not explaining this very well. Basically, she gets the chance to learn from him and become buddies with him, and she's trying to figure out a way to free her mom from her enslavement on the moon. And so, yes, that was kind of the setup of that story. And I just felt like it was trying to do too much. It just didn't quite give me everything that I wanted. I think it has potential, and I think this author, this is her debut. I definitely want to see what more she does. I just feel like I never really got super connected to any of the characters. And I just felt like the story, there was just too much going on, and it was super kind of basic, predictable feeling to me. So that's where that one's at. Moving into February, I actually found at my new library that I have that they have The Girl from the Other Side manga, which I've been wanting to read for a long time, but my other library where I used to live didn't have it, and this one has all 10 volumes. So I started reading that, and I adored it. So I read the first volume in February, and it was just super fun. We're following this girl who basically is staying with this kind of demon-y type guy, and she's just a little girl. She got left behind by her aunt in her town, and there's this weird disease going through the land. And basically, if the guy she's staying with were to touch her, she would get this kind of disease and turn into one of them. So he tries his hardest not to touch her, and they have cute little tea parties, and they just have the cutest, sweetest little relationship. He really does care for her, and she's just waiting for her aunt. But there's obviously other political things going on out in the world between each side, and she's on the other side versus the town side. So yeah, it's kind of, it was just I don't know, kind of heartwarming in a weird way. Yeah, it's an interesting manga. I would definitely check it out. And then we also had, what else on my list here? Oh, Heartstopper Volume 4, which I think might be my favorite Heartstopper story that I've read. I love this one. These follow Nick and Charlie and their relationship as they kind of get to know each other, and they're just super cute together and really sweet. And this one was a little more emotional and really just kind of dealt with some deeper topics, but I thought it was really well done. And I adore these. Then I read The Rattled Bones, which may be my favorite for the month. This one, we're following this girl. She like lives on the coast, and she goes out and she like does traps for I think it was crabs, might have been lobsters, I don't know. Anyways, and she sees on this island like this woman, and she's like, that's weird, nobody lives on this island, it's just like this island that's been deserted. And she goes over there and she finds this guy has actually started doing an investigation out there on this old like town that used to be out there, and he's trying to find out more about them. He's like digging things up and whatever. He's out there from a university, and so they kind of start working together and start trying to figure out what's going on out there. But she keeps also seeing this woman out there as well. She's never seen her before, and just they're trying to basically get to the bottom of what happened there and what happened with this woman. And I really I loved the mystery behind it and the relationship between the two of them and them becoming friends, and they each had their own different unique background and what happened to this town that was out there. And everybody like in the town that knows about this island, like none of them want to talk about what happened before, and she had no idea that anybody ever lived out there, and it's a very well kept town secret. It was good. And then also number 2 in the Bear and the Nightingale series, I read that month, The Girl in the Tower, and I super loved that one. The Bear and the Nightingale follows like this girl, and she can like see these like household beings that kind of live in our world, and they help with different things. Like there's one in the stables that helps with the horses, and another one that like keeps the little fire warm, and you leave out offerings to them to keep them strong. But then this priest comes into town and changes everything, and we get a new stepmom, and she agrees with the beast and the priest, and everybody stops giving out these offerings, and the young girl just can see that this isn't right. And yeah, it's very interesting. Like it's got this very like folktale, fairy tale vibe. The atmosphere is gorgeous in it. Like it's in Russia and like freezing cold winter, and it's, yeah, I don't know. It's a hard one to explain, but it is so well written, and I just adored the way the story is woven together. It is beautiful. Second book, beautiful. Loved it. It's a little slower, especially in the beginning, but just the way things all start kind of just mixing themselves in there, and ooh, chef's kiss. And my one not so favorite for the month was The House at the Bottom of the Lake by Josh Malerman. Basically, these two kids, they go out on a date and they go on this boat, and then they find that there's this house at the bottom of this lake, and they decide to like dive down and check it out, and literally nothing happens. Like it starts out well and you're like, what's gonna actually happen? And then just nothing happens. Why is this house down there? Like I don't know. Literally nothing happens. They just find this house and they decide to explore it. And I'm just like, what? Why? Where is this going? Like, I don't know. It was a flop for me, unfortunately. Now, let's move on into March. I actually own a few of the books that I read in March that I really, really enjoyed. So let's start with The Paris Apartment by Lucy Foley. This was so much fun. In this one, we're following, what is her name? Jess, and she calls her brother, and she's like, hey, I need a place to stay. I'm coming to stay with you in this lovely Paris apartment that he has. He's like, oh, okay. So then she shows up, and he's like not there, and she's like, what is going on? He should be here. I don't understand. And so she starts kind of meeting the neighbors on the different floors and asking them when was the last time they saw him and what's going on, and kind of starts getting herself enveloped into this mystery of where is her brother. And we have like Sophie, who lives in the penthouse, and Mimi, who lives on the 4th floor. So each of the floors kind of has their own perspective in here. So you're getting like little pieces of the puzzle, and everybody seems to be unhappy with ever since Ben came to stay in this apartment. They feel like it's completely thrown it off. And I know in the beginning, I was just like, so is Ben the bad guy in this situation, or is everybody else doing something they shouldn't be? And he knows about it. And so, love this one. I also did a reread of Well Met, and I loved this the first time, but I may have loved it even more the second time. The fun Renaissance vibes in here were beautiful. The romance between these two was so cute. I literally could read this again and be totally happy to right now. So in this one, we're following Emily, and she moves in with her big sister because her big sister got into a car accident and she is going through physical therapy. She's having a hard time walking and getting around, but her bigger sister also has a teenage daughter who needs to get to school and different things like that. So she's there to help kind of run the household and help with the daughter, her niece. But her niece wants to do this Renaissance fair on the weekends over the summer, and she needs an adult to go and also volunteer with her. So Emily is going to be one of the wenches at the bar, and then she meets Simon, who's super grumpy, but he runs the fair, and he's the English teacher at the school, and the two of them have a cute little summery romance, and it was just so adorable, so adorable. And then Everything Beautiful is Not Ruined by Danielle Young Ullman. This one is a YA contemporary. We're following this girl who basically is going to go on this like backpacking trip out in the wilderness with a bunch of other kids who are all like youth that are a little more in trouble, and kind of explore what's going on with them. And they all are kind of, it's like therapy out in the woods. So they're all camping, very rugged, but also talking about some of the things that have happened to them, their feelings, and different stuff like that. And then we're also getting some flashbacks to the girl with her family and her mom, and what happened kind of leading up to her needing to go on this trip. And yeah, it talked about some really tough topics, but it was so well done and beautiful, and just, it was gorgeous. And then the last book that is in my favorites for the month of March was The Last House on Needless Street. This one surprised me. It went in a different direction than I never would have thought. Very interesting. I really just loved the way the author put this story together. So in this one, we're following this person who lives in this house at the end of Needless Street. And so I'm just going to read you the Goodreads synopsis of this because I don't know how to explain it. And yeah, so it says, this is the story of a serial killer, a stolen child, revenge, death, and an ordinary house at the end of an ordinary street. All these things are true, and yet they are all lies. You think you know what's inside the last house on Needless Street. You think you've read the story before. That's where you're wrong. So you really are thinking you're like following the serial killer in their life, and then also like there's this kidnapping and some revenge stuff going on with some other characters, and just like, it's very weird and interesting. You're also following from the perspective of a cat. But yeah, just like the actual conclusion to the story was not something I would ever think, but I loved it. Loved the way it all came together. So there's that one. Now, before I even look at my list, I know which one is going to be on my least favorite here, and that is Plain Bad Heroines. I did not even finish this book. This is the one I got to like 65% in, and I just was like, I can't do it anymore. I'm super bored. So bored. It was just nothing happening. It was these like characters that just were finding out more about and their relationships, but it just took too long for anything to happen. Nothing was happening. The plot was just nothingness, and it should have been somethingness. So we're following basically Brookhaunts is a school back in the early 1900s that these girls die at, and then they had created this club, the Plain Bad Heroines, based around this book that they were reading and they were really into. And in subsequent years, the next couple years, a couple other kids die and they end up shutting down the school. So there's been a book out about it, and now they're going to make a documentary. And so they're all going to go back to the school to film, and it literally took almost to where I was at to even get out there. Anyways, so you're following like the author and how she's unhappy about the way things are being produced, and then the two actresses that are playing the main girls, and I don't know, I just was expecting a little bit more haunted creepiness, and there was like a little bit, and I'd be like, oh yeah, we're getting there, and then it would just be like, and that's over, and now nothing's happening again. Great, cool, fun. Yeah, not my favorite, okay guys? And then the other one on my March list is I Killed Zoe Spanos. This one I was actually enjoying quite a bit. And then the ending happened, and it didn't make any sense. It didn't work at all. It felt like a cheap shot of an ending where you're just like, I don't really know how I want to end this, so we're just going to go with this. But it doesn't really totally work or fit or anything. It just... the ending was awful. It was just straight awful. This one we're following this girl. She goes and she's going to be like babysitting this other girl for the summer. And she looks a lot like this other girl who used to babysit her, but is found dead. And then she's like also listening to this other girl's doing a podcast about the investigation into the murder of the other girl that got that got murdered. And it sounded so interesting because it had this really cool podcast element to it. And then the girl that goes out and is the second one that's doing the babysitting, she actually confesses to the murder, and she's like, I don't think she actually did it. What's actually going on? Yeah, so you're like trying to figure out what happened. It just, I'm so bummed by the way it ended. Super, super, super bummed. So that one was very unfortunate. But that's kind of where we're at. So I would love to hear some of your guys' favorites for the last few months, and I will talk to you guys soon. Bye guys!